Hi there, welcome back to Quirky Faith. Today I'm very excited to be here with Nate Roskam. He's a good friend of mine. I knew him, I think when he was born, maybe.
Probably a long time.
It's kind of scary, yeah, a long time. Our families go way back. We got a lot of water under the bridge, and I can tell you there is good things happen when you stick with people and when you love people and you keep on going on. So I've got a couple questions for Nate today. I'm going to let him first tell me what he's doing now. A little shout out about what his passion is. So tell me, Nate, what are you about? What's going on?
Hey, I'm Nate Roskam, and I work with an organization called Because International that developed right here the shoe that grows, and I brought one to show my Quirky Faith friends. This is our first kind of primary product called the shoe that grows. It's literally a shoe that grows 5 sizes, adjusts at the front, the sides, and the back for kids living in poverty. And we believe when you give kids opportunity to succeed, good things happen. And shoes are huge. You know, some kids, they can't go to school. There's a gal who got a pair of these shoes. Her name's Ludi, and her school uniform included shoes that she didn't have, so she couldn't go to school. So it provides education, obviously health and sanitation. You know, millions of kids struggle with soil-borne illnesses and those sorts of things, and plus self-confidence.
Yep.
Kids who have shoes just do better. So
plus it's pink. They're not all pink, but this one's pink.
Yeah, pink, blue, black, and tan. 4 colors, 3 different sizes, and they all expand. The goal is 5 sizes and to last for several years. So kids can always have a pair of shoes that fit.
I love it.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up on Disney princesses, and I know because I watched Cinderella, a shoe can change your life.
Oh man,
right here.
A shoe changes everything.
Yeah, it can.
Yeah.
So you will be hearing more about that on Quirky Faith. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet.
Great stuff brewing. It's going to be good regardless.
Yep, it's coming.
Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to talk to Nate about today is one of my passions, which is grace. I talk about grace all the time. If you've read anything on Quirky Faith, it's, okay, Mindy, enough of the grace. But, so I thought, I'm going to ask my friend Dr. Nate Roskam.
Oh, here it is.
Because that's fun to say. He is. He's really earned his doctorate this year from NNU, right?
No, it's Portland Seminary.
Portland Seminary.
Which is connected to George Fox. So they just changed their name this year. It was George Fox Evangelical Seminary. Now it's Portland Seminary.
Did you get a new diploma with the new name on it?
I have to pay for it. Can you believe that? Any George Fox people out there? So I just might. I just might.
Yeah, because they're going to be like, that college doesn't even exist.
Yeah, it doesn't exist anymore.
It's not real.
So
you might have to, maybe for Christmas.
Oh, there we go.
Anyway, he's a doctor. He's way smarter. He's read more than me, which is saying something. And I wanted to know, Nate, what is grace? What does it mean to you? Why should we care?
Yeah. It's interesting. Grace for me is probably one of the most paramount pieces of my journey. And I think because of how I've seen it lived out in the lives of people around me. And what it's done in my own life. And interesting, we were just talking earlier, I love the little background noise, thanks to my mother and her chiming clocks. But we were talking earlier, this role because, and the kind of the way we utilize innovation and how innovation changes how we look at things, how we look at a pair of shoes, and how we can make things better by making better things. And I think as you were posed this question to me earlier this week, and as I was thinking, I was like, I feel like for me, grace is like God's instrument, or innovation is God's instrument of grace. Like He is continuing to make things new in us always. And so it's this perpetual idea that He loves us unconditionally and looks at us and sees the beautiful things that we are and are becoming. And I think in some ways we would feel like, oh, that means He's not satisfied or always wants me to be different. And that's not the case. Innovation isn't saying that that's not good enough, but that there's always things that can be improved, and not to degrade what was, and especially when we're talking about created beings who, we're always being sanctified. Like God's grace is always continuing to renew and restore. That's grace at work, and God seeing in us the things that maybe at times we don't even see, and then the optimism that comes with that. Like. I'm an unapologetic Wesleyan, right? And I think the optimism of grace that propels us to do and become things that we could never think of or imagine.
Yep.
And so that's, and I've seen that over and over again in stories of lives of people, where grace is what propels people forward. And I love to tell those stories, and I think that's, the transformation that comes from what Christ has done through his life, death, and resurrection, and then just what grace can do, the optimism that comes from the restoration of Christ's redemption for us. So
I think the optimism is so key for me too, because I think sometimes in our worst days, we lose hope.
Totally.
There's no hope. There's no way forward. And hope, you have to have hope. But how can you in a hopeless situation unless grace enters?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, there's room for me still. I didn't disqualify myself, or I didn't totally mess this up.
Exactly.
And grace rekindles hope.
Yep.
You make it.
Yeah. And for me, it was interesting. One of the phrases that I've held on to forever, and that almost got kicked out of my dissertation by my one of my editors, was this idea of in our faith journey, it's all about living into and out of who we're created and called to be. And she's like, that's so cumbersome, and it just doesn't make any sense. I'm like, I know, and you're smarter than me, but man, this is something that I believe in with all my heart. It's like, because I think it's the whole optimism of grace piece and in our theological perspective and understanding of who we are. Like, a lot of times people can live into and say, yes, Christ has saved me, but they still hang on to the baggage. And then we begin to, we make the list, right? I don't smoke, drink, or chew, or go with girls who do. And we turn, we transact faith. And then that's how we kind of live in that. And then we're trying to figure out who to become by looking at what we don't want to be.
Right.
And then in Christ, all I see in Jesus in Scripture is him standing before us saying, come, I'm making all things new. And the reality that we then are empowered by grace to be who God's created and called us to be by looking at Christ and what we can become and being an imitator of Jesus, rather than trying to be like Jesus by not doing that.
Right.
It just never made sense to me. So it's always this idea of, becoming, living into and then out of this redemptive story.
Yeah. No, it's how you get life and then you live it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So C, big fancy words. Dr. agrees that grace is really important. There's so many things that we could talk about grace all day long, but I don't have time to talk it today all day long. We may do this again. I do have one more question for you though, and that is the next thing that I've been thinking about a lot and I've talked about on Quirky Faith is, if you read other bloggers or lots of social media, what you hear a lot about is what's wrong with the church.
Yeah.
How did we lose the millennials, or where we went sideways, or why this prosperity gospel is bad, and it is, and why this, over here is wrong. And there's so much about what's wrong, and I believe that sometimes what we need to do is talk about what's right with the church.
Yeah.
So I want to know, hey, it's the senior Roskam. I want to know what gives you hope about the church, or why do you think the church is okay? What are we doing right? What gives you hope?
I think for me, what gives me hope is young clergy, specifically within the Nazarene denominations. I'm an ordained elder in the Church of the Nazarene, and I get asked this question a lot. And you mentioned conversations about millennials and leaving, and one thing I always said when I was on staff and even now is, I think sometimes it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because we stand in front of congregations and talk about how millennials are leaving while millennials are sitting in front of us. And now
you're leaving, you should be mad and leave. Yeah.
And now Gen Z, kind of the same deal. And I think to me, it's working with and engaging. And this is what I always ask people. It's like, well, who do you know?
Yeah.
Right? Like, who are the individuals that you're in relationship with that are in this demographic that you're quoting and saying all these negative things about? And for me, as a pastor, I would never call myself a theologian, but as a thinker, and as clergy, so many concerns about young clergy and their theology and their the progressive, liberal, all of these kinds of arguments. And for me, it's like, well, who do you know?
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of them, and I've done a lot of research and read a lot of them and talked to a lot of them, and actually theologically they're they're more coherent with who we are. For me in our denomination, I think it's the same in many denominations, is they're coherent mostly with the kingdom perspective of the gospel, but also within our traditions, there's young clergy who understand our story, and they know it probably better than we do, because, if you look at, movements, when they get away from the founders, that is diluted. And then everybody's living off of kind of the testimony of the generation before. Well, in our tribe, we're, several generations removed, and you lose the whole understanding and narrative of your story, where you're founded. And this generation is returning to that to understand, well, where do we begin?
Right.
And it engages, theologically in an understanding of justice and what the gospel is really about, and humility and grace. And I think they articulate it in ways that really returns back to the heart of our story as not only Nazarenes, but as Christians. And so I think that's what gives me a ton of hope. And I love working and mentoring young leaders. I think in some ways an Xer, I feel like we're a generation that kind of got skipped. Sometimes, and I joke with people about that. But I love the role that I have. As an elder, now as a doctor, there's just places that I can go and use my story and position to help make space for other people, and raise up generations that they can lead and create a platform for that. And I think those are things that you can do with this, with Quirky Faith, and I think are doing and want to do. And so that's what gives me hope, because is it a mess? For sure, man. I go to a large church in a college town in Nampa that experienced some horrible dysfunction in the last couple years, and saw some relationships just implode, and there's nothing worse than being in the middle of factions.
Oh no, it's bad.
But even in the midst of that, recognizing that God is good, he's a good father, and he has given us the ministry of reconciliation. That's why I love to use that word. I think, 2 Corinthians 5 nails it. I mean, we've been given this ministry of reconciliation. And
That's
I think
right.
if we want to be redemptive agents, man, why would people who aren't a part of the church, why would they want to be a part of an entity that's supposed to be this reconciling force for the world that can't even get along with itself?
Right.
So
totally.
So we
agree.
can't even reconcile within each other.
Well, and I love that verse about bear with one another in brotherly love.
Yeah.
I think it's so honest.
Yeah.
They didn't say, always get along. No, they said bear with one another, because there's going to be times when you're both bears.
Yes.
Yeah, there can be times where it's like, nah, this thing fell apart, but
Totally.
we're committed at the core, and we have Jesus in common, we're going to figure it out.
Yep.
So what I want to talk about in some of these new features, just for those of you watching, is we're going to talk about the beautiful, messy bride of Christ, because that's what the church is.
Yeah.
She's the bride of Christ, and he loves her. I don't believe that he gives up on her.
Right.
I think Revelations makes it really clear that she will be standing at the end, and that there's power in coming back to church. And if you think the church has problems, you're right. She does sometimes, but maybe you, the one on the couch with the problem, is supposed to be part of that solution. So if you're concerned that your church, let's say has a racism problem, or your church has ignored, abuse or something, then get your butt back to church and be part of figuring it out and making the solution, because it's a good place to be.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And quit shopping, quit trying to find the perfect spot. And
There's not one.
No, because at the end of the day, it's just about giving yourself wholly to Christ and his church, and just saying, I'm here and I'm going to, like you said, be a part of the solution. And that's one of the things. And I think part of that too is if you're in church and you hear that from people, continue to, I just love to disciple people and be in relationship regardless of where they go, knowing that I have a lot of friends who no longer go to my church, but I'm still in discipling relationships with them. And it hasn't been awkward, and I have friends who are, long-time members of churches, or even people who have been on staff who have let that hurt them and taken it personal. And it's like, man, you can't take that personal. It's not about you. Maybe ask a few questions about, the person's heart, where they're at in their journey, what they need, what they're missing, and challenge them. Stay in the relationship so that you can, continue to be a Jesus pointer,
Well, and it's October. It's Pastor Appreciation Month.
Oh, it is.
It is. So there's something really beautiful about a thank you, too. And to remember that your pastoral staff, while not perfect, is a gift to you, and to try a thank you. It's shocking what that'll do for
Right.
people.
Totally. That's very true.
Mm-hmm. You got anything else, Dr. Nate?
No, I think this is good.
All right.
I like it. I like that you made me think about grace, and I love the little. I think the Lord gave me a little nugget there that I'm going to continue to unpack this idea of grace as innovation in our own lives.
Yeah.
We'll see where
Have
it
you
goes.
read Madeline L'Engle?
No.
Oh yeah, you got to read Madeline L'Engle. She's mostly fiction.
Yeah.
But she talks a ton about grace as creation and the God pouring out His creative work in us.
Well, that is good.
Oh, it's fun.
Love it.
All right, see, I got a book in there.
Yes. Nice.
All right, well, thank you. I appreciate it. We will probably have more of these down the road. Thanks for watching.
See ya.